Would you please stand during the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it's
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight's this is a work session, just to remind everybody there's no decisions to be made or anything like that. It's informational, and this is I went through the whole report, 62 pages, I think is what you have. So we're gonna talk to my council members up here, and we're gonna skip mayor and council updates and staff reports. As you see, we're down to 2. So we'll move on and go right to new business and public works directors. So city engineer Lance Hopkins presentation, what's happening with infrastructure in 24-25. Lance, you're up. Yeah, you're the only one here. So
that might be better. Yeah. All right, well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. This is a presentation that I gave last Wednesday to Rotary. So kind of got voluntold that this would be a good one to give the council speed as far as what's going on with some of our projects, look a little bit more in depth on the tank and pumping station project, what we're seeing up, the monstrosity up Sings Canyon Road there, and give you guys a chance to go ahead and ask questions, interrupt me as we go. As you guys think of things or want to know more about them, feel free just to ask, and we'll stop and look more in depth at what's on these pictures. So first is the Lander 4 million gallon tank and pumping station project. So the purpose of this project was to replace 3 failing tanks. And so if you guys remember, We have everything from exposed rebar that you can see in the top of those tanks on the 500,000 gallon tanks to the strands that are busting on the Ellis tank before we took it down. So we were seeing that infiltration into the concrete, the cracking, the rusting, and then those strands busting and then putting more pressure on the next piece. So we were kind of worried about that chain reaction failure. And then that sent us after emergency funds with Wyoming Water Development, on the path of figuring out, can we put a new lid on these tanks? What can we do to, keep our infrastructure intact? And ultimately came up with this plan of replacing 3 existing tanks with 1 tank, and we gained that 1 million gallons of capacity by adding 4 million and losing 3. Wow. So this picture, oh, it's going quicker than I want, is ultimately what we're looking at as the map of the city in our different zones. So, what we try to do is serve a minimum and maximum pressure throughout the community. And with that, we're trying to, be above 40, but anything above 100, we start to get a little bit scared. So as we're putting up this new tank, making sure that we have the right valving, the right pressure reducing valves in place in certain locations as we're replacing the other tanks so that our customers still get a consistent pressure, but we're providing backup through the system. The pumping station helps provide that backup from the difference between our higher elevation tank that you see up by the water treatment plant and then this new tank that's going to be at Mortimer Lane. And in between there, mechanical valves that help flow and regulate pressures, and then ways that we can manually override that system if we need to as far as operators. The pumping station will be automated. So that process, if something were to happen in the hospital zone or that upper area, it should automatically close valves, boost pressure with this new pumping station we have, and keep that area in service. Hospitals are supposed to have multiple connections to zones. Ours has multiple connections to the same zone. And so that wasn't real good when we looked at it. The existing infrastructure that was in place is also a problem because it was only meant to serve just the hospital, and we have a whole large zone that it actually feeds in that area. So just trying to correct some issues as we go through these projects. Go ahead, John. Yep. 2-day supply, depending on time of year. Yeah, if that. And so right now, water treatment plant is making about 5 million gallons a day. And so we're using more than 4, so less than 2 days. If something bad were to happen, we would try to call timeout as quickly as possible. That involves calling our 10 major customers saying, hey, we need you to stop. The majority of that water being consumed or used, I guess, is irrigation. So 1 to 1.2 is our consistent number that we see in our community during off-peak times. And then the rest of that is what we're putting on our lawns and public spaces. Yeah, it is. So project scope, as we look at this, this light doesn't shine well on the TV. What we're looking at is in the far bottom left, that's where the new tank is going in. As you look in other areas, there's sections of little pieces of line that have to be built to replace sections, increase sections, keep customers in service, and automate the system. So even as you look by the community center and the golf course, that piece of pipe that got bored underneath the canal is replacing old faulty pipe that we know leaks underneath that ditch in that area, and then connects back into Buena Vista near Capitol is what's happening there. And then that pumping station is sitting below the hill as you start to see the building being built. So current construction contract price. So 9.5, that's roughly where we are with High Country to date as we're paying our pay estimates. Our grants that we've received for this project, the abandoned mine lands, 3.5 million, Wyoming Water Development is 7 million, but we have engineering fees, other things that we pay for than just construction. And we're still trying to work through uh, some of the logistics of the projects on connections, because we need to work with the landowner on finalizing an easement, which I'm hoping to bring to you next month to bring in another piece of the project that we have a bid on. So we're going to be real close as far as, breaking even on this project or a little bit out of pocket on the enterprise funds between the grants that we've already received and where we'll land on the state monies that are helping us out. So pretty awesome on a project this big that we're sitting on $10.5 million worth of grant, 9.5 in construction. So here's the tank site, if you remember it, as it was at one peaceful point in time. And then as we look at what the construction looks like, the demo area is all of the tank, as well as the blue that's coming in and out of the tank on this picture. So we didn't want to leave the parts underneath the tank as old or through the vault or underneath the highway. It would be pretty bad if we had to come back and fix infrastructure in that area after we were done with this. So that's the area of focus on the tank. And the lines coming in and out, there's valves that control when when the tank fills based on elevation and controls we can override, as well as pressure valves that take that pressure from that tank being twice as tall, cuts it down so that we don't serve more pressure to the north end of town than we ever did before. So we should always be serving a consistent pressure like we did. So doubling the height doesn't mean that somebody's calling us and saying, I'm getting more pressure on the north end of town. And the north end of town does get very close to 100 pounds of pressure. So we're always checking that, trying to, not let anything creep up too high on us. So we're starting the demo. This is building the pad next to the tank. Everything has to be level. The excavation materials that were taken out around the tank were put in to build that elevated area. And the goal was to get that very flat for all the concrete pours that are coming. So this is more of that construction. And you can see that the tank is starting to be taken down at this point. And this is the Ellis tank, obviously, that I'm talking about, but more construction and deconstruction, I guess, is the walls are coming down and we're seeing the concrete removed and hauled off. I think that one ended up going to contractor. A lot of times those materials can be broken down and recycled. And so I don't think that they took that over the scale. I think their goal is to keep that in a yard somewhere. We offer some of that ourselves as far as our concrete pile, but this one was, I think that the contractor was responsible for it. So I can ask Chad Connell what he did with that. So we've got our flat pad built for construction, and they're starting to import materials. The rock has been blasted out. So there were several dynamite sessions out there where they were blowing up rock and removing it under supervision and getting the area to excavate out and build the tank. And now they're importing the structural fill under the tank. Very important that that's solid and not moving anywhere. And as we see them importing the materials, they're working that into the tank design. So, we progressed into importing those structural fill materials. This is rebar starting to be placed with waterproofing underneath it, getting ready for the concrete pour, water stop on the outside. This crew out there is amazing. I mean, it's the same group, the subcontractors, DN Tanks to High Country on this project. And it's the same guys from start to finish. And they all know their role in each piece of what they do. It's not that they brought in concrete people, they brought in rebar people. They just brought in people who know what their role is for that part of the process. And then they move on to the next part of the process. So we're on to pouring the floor all in one continuous pour in one day. They're pumping it and continuing to finish, moving rails. It doesn't even seem like they're talking, but everybody knows what everybody's supposed to be doing out there. Ooh, I would have to get back to you as far as the volume of that one. So we're finishing up the pour at this point. Then they flooded it for curing. for additional strength and to, have water on top of it while it's set up for strength. And then they're starting to set up their scaffolding, and the scaffolding is to support the structure that they're going to be putting around as they work. So you can see on the outsides, there's reinforcement strands that are going to be tied to the outside of the tank at some point, water stop, and a really impressive floor. Scaffolding starting to be put up and working through the process. So this is great. I guess I didn't really know how they were going to do this, but what they needed that level surface for was that they came in, they bought all new lumber, and then they formed out every piece that they were going to put up on this tank. They didn't bring in existing forms. They put in, shaped the bottom of the pour that they wanted to pour, tested it out. And then you can see the yellow on this box. Well, that's a portion of the roof that they want to keep an idea of what it is. They pour the first one up to a certain elevation that's marked out on the boards. It's reinforced. They tie the next layer of reinforcement for the second one, and they're just stacking one piece on top of the other and building the same piece over and over and over again. And they're tracking each thing that goes into the place they know by the color when they get the crane in, where that goes. And so these are set up all around the site in different places of different sizes with different knockouts, different purposes, and did everything on site as they're putting up forms and doing other things. So there was continuous concrete pours going on almost a daily basis of pouring another level once they were ready. So this is the scaffolding that's up and ready for the crane to start coming in. And this is them taking those pieces after they've cured and starting to use that crane. I think you guys saw that giant crane come to town, probably the biggest one Lander's seen, I would imagine, or at least to my knowledge. And, they're building the sides, placing them up piece by piece, and then putting the roof, leaning on top of the scaffolding as they go. And there's small gaps in between each piece that they'll come back and address later, but just laying out like giant Legos sitting on the structure. I think that crane came in 3 different trucks, and the counterweights, to reach the distance that it does was pretty amazing. We were told after we bid this project originally that there was going to be significant savings if we had worked through getting an easement by the tank contractor. Well, the tank contractor is only one piece of the bid, whereas the site work and, everything else that happens there, comes into a total bid. So when we put this back out for bid, we did it as an alternative because we thought maybe we'd had to buy an easement, depending on how much money would be saved working with the property owner to be able to use a much smaller crane and be able to work around the tank more, or using a big crane. And, that's where we got down to that like $10,000 difference of not making it worth our time to go purchase an easement for this project. But it was amazing how tight that was when this crane is, I think $1,000 an hour is what I was told is, the subcontractors building them. So they were very motivated to get this off of site before the 4th of July. So they were told they couldn't go home until all the walls were up and every piece was set. Yeah. Yeah. And contractor's been great. This picture is my 2 kids, my mom, and then my nephew Garrett. And so I was able to take Garrett out here. He loves things like this. And I think it was the highlight of his 4th of July visit was to come out here. So every time I talk to him now, he still asks about the project. Deanne was great to let us do a site visit. And, I don't know if I'd be in Lander if it weren't for Garrett and some of the family things that happened to our family. So pretty awesome to share something like this with him. So we're still putting up pieces. This is inside. So I didn't get to take this picture, but the engineer did, as far as what it looks like with all that structure and all that roof structure placed. Go ahead. No, you asked away. This is what this is about. Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. I mean, as
Okay.
far as safety, security, and all that weight on top of it, it's amazing, and at this point, they've put up and they're sealing the joints. They're getting ready for the upper pour. So they're going to start pumping concrete in all of the joints and all the pieces and in between them. So that wood structure around the outside is safety, but it's also holding a concrete edge pour is what it's doing. And then as you look at the metal, it's epoxied down in between each vertical piece. But then on the inside, that's secured and bolted, and then that's ready for filling in the gaps. So they're filling in that structure as they go. And I'm like, how do you get all that scaffolding out of this? Like, I just see the small holes and the penetrations, and they're like, yeah, that's this. And it's the perfect size to take that all down one piece at a time and pass it through the hole. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be a fun day of passing those little pieces of scaffolding outside, stacking it back up, and they'll seal that hole. So that's kind of where we are with the tank right now. And I guess I can talk a little bit more about what happens next. So as they fill in all those voids, there's actually a bunch of wire wrap reinforcement that goes around the outside of that tank. And it's going to be gauge wire tied into the reinforcement that's there. And then it's going to get shotcreted and painted to finish it all up. And then sealed on the inside. As far as what's going on, they were going to do one more pour to keep sliding from not being an issue against the tank in the back before they backfill it with rock. So we'll see them remove that pad and stack everything kind of back up. And we're picking a very neutral, hopefully matching color up there that doesn't stand up and blends into that hillside is what the goal is. Maybe I'll run that by you guys so that you agree with that. Where we put that much paint down in
No,
this
just
town.
paint it.
Yeah. And so any questions about the tank or anything you guys want to know more? I guess some of what I may have missed was the little building in the background here that was being built too. So we had an existing building. There it is. You can see it. It's up in this picture. It's wood structure and it's over a vault. And then we're capping that. It is half underground, half above ground, and we're doing a full building over the top. So they're retrofitting placement walls on that. And then that will be where we operate this facility out of and where all the valves are and testing for chlorine. And, our day-to-day operations will be in that small building that's over the valves. As you see it go up in the back there, pretty awesome. That was just pre-manufactured pieces that was placed down as well. There's roof pieces that go down and then they pour concrete and seal that up in a similar way that they're building the actual reservoir.
I tell you, those guys, Lance, really know what they're doing. I've been really impressed with how that tank went up and what they're doing. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no talk. I don't see any talking out there or when they're doing stuff. It's just automatic like a machine. They know exactly what their job roles are. So
They really like Lander and the people of Lander. So
Yeah.
I think people are treating them very well as well, which is great to hear.
well, we want more water, so
Yeah.
more storage. So
Oh, no. Look at that, how we're doing it.
Yeah. So once this tank is built, I guess let me walk through this next step of the process. So this pumping station that we're building is really important as well. And there's phasing to the project of certain things that can and can't happen until this pumping station is built. And a lot of that is so when we fill or backfeeding customers or putting in upper zone infrastructure like the control valves, we can't do that portion of the project right now without interrupting our only feed to the hospital. So we have to finish the tank, get it online, be able to boost the pressure, and then we can go back in and cut in the valves and the control that we need in that one-way feed. So it gives us that redundancy to work through that. The contractor's really nervous about meeting schedule at this point because this is supposed to be done at the end of the year. And he's like, okay, we could bring a tanker truck up to the hospital right now and we could, do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that puts us at really high risk. What if we talk about giving you more time at the end of the project or in the spring? Because that isn't as important as getting the security and the safety in place for this. And then we could come back and do that later. It's not really one of those things that costs us, more money other than the engineering involved to make sure that we phase this correctly and we're not doing anything out of place. My worry right now is having to fire back up this pumping station and then seeing if it works or not. We know that it was losing pressure the last time we used it. It drove a lot of this idea of replacing it and building something new and replacing the line and getting everything shored up so that we can operate the town in a loop back. So this is the pumping station below the hospital hill. It got excavated. We're looking at the materials in place for the substructure and then getting ready for the concrete pour and the walls. The piping that's coming up, that's one side going underneath the canal back towards where the low pressure side is. The other one goes by the canal where the high pressure is in that area. The reason we picked this area is because both of those zones are close together at that point. So this is where we brought up the grade. It's getting ready for pouring platforms for the pumping equipment to come in. So they poured the floor at this point. It's curing, and now they're setting the building. So it's kind of what you see up there today. Walls are being placed. It's being welded in place. The roof structure is going down one piece at a time. They'll pour on top of that. But the pumping skid is still moving back in time. It's one of those items we worried about from the very beginning of the schedule, like what piece of equipment's going to be a problem. They said, no problem on getting this to you. It was supposed to be here at the beginning of the summer. It's keeps bumping back. Now it's mid-August, that's supposed to be here, and that's still controlling a lot of this actual project schedule as far as when that equipment can be installed. So that's 4 different pumps. And when it comes in on a skid like that, and it can keep up with every bit that we can give on the 12-inch line that feeds it. So it's got essentially the equivalent of a 12-inch full capacity line as far as volume. And we've got, as far as what we're serving on that, we have the hospital zone, but it also goes out to the industrial park. And then that goes up to the cemetery. And so everything that's up on that hill from the rodeo tank over and down is where we're at. So we shouldn't ever need more than 1,500 gallons per minute as far as demand on it, but it'll keep up with fire flows. So if we need to open up 3,000 out there, it'll do it. Yep. And they operate based on sequencing, and then they rotate through their cycle as far as what's lead and lag, so that it wears equally essentially and has backup. This one's kind of fun. So, as we start to look through the system, we figure out what we can control and what we can't control. Realize we wish we had valves in certain areas that we can't turn off and we shouldn't turn off, or we're going to knock a large portion of customers out of service. So this is putting a valve in live. So they're there. They've got an apparatus that clamps to the bottom of the pipe, the top goes around, and then it cuts a hole out. And then we have a valve where we need it to gain control. So part of this project was gaining some control so we can shut certain areas off, isolate them, and then still keep, our goal is to keep town in service and shut down as few customers as possible. So it's phased pretty well. This is the Mortimer Lane bore. So we had to put a new pipe where we talked about that pressure reducing valve, where we're replacing the tank on the hill, below Mortimer Lane, I guess, the tank that you can never see. That was, I guess,
Manger tank.
It's Mager tank, if you know where that is, but it was on the old Bill's property in that area. And so with that, the PRV vault needs to be placed alongside the highway and is going to replace that tank. So we'll take that high pressure, tap into it, cut the pressure, and serve the same downstream pressure in that area. So this is as we push the casing pipe and they weld more and then keep pushing on these rails, They get the casing in, and then they can come back and push the plastic pipe inside that casing pipe. And now we have water line inside of that. If anything happens, you can remove that pipe, put a new one in, the metal pipe. So that's kind of the tank and pumping station project where we are to date. Maybe a little bit behind schedule based on materials, but as far as the tank goes, right on schedule where they want to be. But you guys have any thoughts, questions? You want to talk? Yeah.
Will we be good, or do you see more storage in the future?
We had to convince water development for our grant that this is more storage than is needed for a town in the equations for a town our size. So we have more storage than what's necessary. So we have some growth for quite a while that we should be able to sustain this. Our point back was we live in remote Wyoming, and if something happens, it's exactly what John said. We only have so much time of capacity to get something fixed and get pipe here. We're running to Denver, we're running to Salt Lake, wherever materials may be, trying to provide as much redundancy as possible. But the reality is when you're single sourced off of the river and you're requiring your water treatment plant to supply everything, we're not hooked up to another municipality, it puts it at higher risk. So technically we have more volume than, engineers would say we need, but the reality is I think we're probably about where we need to be, and it buys us some time in case something happens. Yeah.
Mhm.
That gained traction. There's a lot of people who are interested in it. Everybody likes the idea, and they're like, okay, Lander, how are you going to, lead this charge and, develop the regional water system? So it's like, yeah, I think if we, went through Hudson and other areas, they would say, this is great. We would definitely hook up to that. I think, regional water and regional sewer both are gaining more traction and more discussion. The long-term planning on this is like, okay, we see millions of dollars of expenditure in developing redundant water supply and alternative water supply. Same thing for sewer treatment. If we're having to build facilities that are meeting EPA and DEQ requirements, how many of those across Fremont County do we really need? And can we, continue to grow and have those conversations and figure that out? Or is the state going to continue to just support everybody's individual plans? I mean, I'd love to see us making some of these connections to nearby water systems and being able to help them out, or in the same situation, we buy water from them in that scenario as backup supply. So even in small pieces, I think we can work towards that, and that can grow to bigger projects. But the state is excited about it. They're willing to fund more investigation on a regional system. Yeah. Well, I think so too. I think in also having control of your water supply and your reservoirs, I mean, that's a really smart move overall for the local area, the county, and the state. So it's a limited resource. So let's talk about the wells and transmission pipeline. This project is finally moving. We got DEQ approval to move forward for the size of wells that we wanted to put in the ground that we were proposing, even though we did water development's requirement on a level 2 study, and it was way more in depth than DEQ's requirements. What we ran into is that DEQ's requirements weren't met exactly, so they didn't know how to approve another state agency's recommendation. And we're like, well, do I have to come down to Cheyenne and have you guys communicate as far as figuring this out? Like, what do we have to do to get an exception, or get the right people in the room? But we finally worked through this, and our design was accepted, and we got permission to move forward. So this project is all by that metal 4 million gallon tank. And it's a new building off the highway, below the water treatment plant near the tank. That's a chlorination building where 4 wells come into a centralized location. We treat that with chlorine, and then there's connections to the existing line that goes into town, or goes into the well, I guess, or the tank, excuse me, so that we can feed those wells right into the tank of treated water in case of an emergency. And so for us, this is something we can use to mix. This is something that we can use as its single supply, but it does not meet irrigation supply. So the demand that we get out of this does not meet that 5 million gallons a day, but it's closer to that 1.2 million gallons a day. So if we're in trouble and we need to run on the wells, we can tell the community no irrigation right now. We're having troubles at the plant. We can't make water. So we need to turn on the alternative supply, or we're making a limited amount and we need to refill. Now, this is from the same aquifer as the river. It's a bathtub that we found underneath it, and we're pulling the water out of that bathtub when we need it, and it'll refill. So it's not a consistent supply, but it is that emergency backup that we need in case something were to happen. And we had multiple scenarios where we weren't able to make water, especially during runoff. Our water comes down so clean, it's near distilled quality, that it doesn't have a charge and you can't get it chemically to meet the requirements. You're throwing a lot of chemical at it, a lot of different chemistry. You're getting different things coming down the river. The operators are trying to react to that high flow, low flow, muddy mess that's coming down, and also trying to figure out how to clean that up. But they're dumping a lot of water and trying again in that process. It takes 8 hours for you to figure out if your jar test, when they test out a sample, worked in the real world. So as they see that through and then find out that their turbidity was too high, they dump it into the ponds, they'll pull a little bit of that water back in, and then they're still trying to make water. So repeatedly I've run into that scenario here, and it's really difficult when we have the most amount of volume available for those guys to dial into the same. I guess it's not the same equation every year. Even though you might have the same flow, same turbidity, the same chemistry may not work. So it is kind of just applying science, a little bit of a guessing game. They'll line up 5 different samples of chemistry, and then whichever one, is closest to, they'll take that, they'll run it again and try to get the best reaction they can in a jar test to then apply that to the big volume coming in at that point in time. And that can change within hours of what they're pulling in the plant and going on in the river. So that's why this emergency supply is so important, is that, it gives them the ability to buy time, and then we could keep the town going if something were to happen to the water, a fire upstream or anything that would affect our ability to make water. This is a viable supply for a period of time. Nope. Yeah, this has been tested, chlorine only at this point, but it's heavier. There's more metals in this. I mean, it's picking up some different things out of running through the ground versus just running down the river. So I think that there will be those people who've grown up on land or water for a long time and know exactly how it tastes, and then this gets introduced, they'll notice it, and so we'll have to advertise if we are ever, adding this to the system or on this very well, so that people know that it's still safe, but it's a little bit different source. So this project, when we started off, getting approval for it, moving forward, getting a grant through water development, we had $1.5 million of estimated costs through, what we thought that would be at that time. Right now, we're a little more in line that we think this is going to be a $4 million project. And the reason we're bidding this right now is to get that cost from contractors. There's a meeting in August with water development. They have said that there are contingency funds available for us for that increased construction cost if we're in that window. So we're hoping that we're within that $4 million, give or take place, and that we can get additional funding to move on this project still end of this year, getting parts ordered, and then construction next year. Okay, anything on that last one? Yes. Yeah. And we still have our eyes on some of these ARPA funds, trying to figure out what's going to be available, what type of projects they're going to award those to. But if there's additional funding at all to, bring down our actual local cost, we'll keep an eye on it and, apply if we're eligible. So land or sidewalk improvement project. So this is around Gannett Peak. So we're trying to improve the accessibility and safety around the elementary school. A lot of places that don't have sidewalks, not ADA friendly, traffic issues, access issues. So we started out with a nice rectangle, hoping that that would cover all the things that we wanted to do around the elementary school. Went out for bid with this project, quickly found out that our grant of $500,000 wasn't going to cover actual costs. We bid this one, had one contractor who was interested. It was a $1.5 million bid, but they didn't meet the DBE requirements YDOT has for this grant. So we've pared this project down. Here's our scope and all the streets that we were trying to do to a much smaller area, kind of cherry pick the most important pieces and the pieces that aren't part of other infrastructure projects such as Cascade and Fifth Street that we're working on or have other funds for and have designed for. And so we focused on kind of that Sweetwater, Seventh, and then the entrance. We were able to get the easement to the entrance, which is awesome. I think that could really be a lifesaver in the future. Happy we haven't had an accident there, but increasing that area is going to be a huge component of improving safety to this school. So we're back out for bid on this project. We had a mandatory pre-bid. We only had one bidder who showed up again. And we called contractors and said, hey, what's the deal on this one? And they're like, we'd be more interested in November. And so we've hit pause on this because this is next year's construction anyway. We're going to change the bid date to later in the year. And then we're going to do another mandatory pre-bid and see if we get more interest. But we really want to see competitive bids on this project, at least 3 different contractors who would be interested if we can get there. But when you have all these big projects going on, all the ARPA funds that are out there, infrastructure money, these smaller projects aren't necessarily as appealing as some of the bigger ones. So ADA, this slide's in there just showing you what some of the corners will look like and the different ramp styles that fit. And we had to make these work with the property that we own within the right of way. So Lincoln Street, we're almost ready to finish our agreement and contract to get that one going. I think that the contractor at this point is interested in doing some repair work for us this year. I'm not sure that they're going to dive into full-on water line, sewer line, underground work still this fall, but they have that ability. So if meets their schedule, which is High Country, who were saying, hey, you can, postpone some of that work on the tank. Maybe you have another project that you want to tackle and get, where First Street freezes up on Lincoln Street for us, or 9th Street on the other end, or where we're seeing constant water line issues, or where we know there's bad sewer lines started. So we'll have our pre-construction meeting. We'll kick off with them and get a more detailed approach of how they want to tackle this project. But the majority of the construction, I'm guessing, is going to happen next year rather than the end of this year, just based on their schedule and project timing. So Lincoln Street, water, sewer, storm, ADA, and pavement. It's not complete replacement. We left anything and everything we could to try to lower the overall project cost. And just to give you guys an idea, the overall bid was 7.2 million, and we're talking about 9 blocks. So pretty expensive as far as infrastructure goes to take on these projects and to find the monies, even when you're trying to salvage as much as possible to get things fixed. This was just a design piece, so we're looking at the blue is the water line, the green is the sewer line, and, just the different components. The yellow in that is just the sidewalk portion that we're replacing. The white is, curb and gutter and sidewalk we're leaving. Each sheet was evaluated with that same thought. Any place we could line versus removing sewer, we kept it in, and we're just going to put liner inside the sewer. So, try to do, this isn't full blown, just go through everything new project. This is still trying to be somewhat conservative, and construction costs have really changed from, 5-7 years ago to today. The sewer is in place, so it varied throughout there, but there's collectors going through different portions of that and it varies. And so a lot of 8-inch sewer in there, but you're getting those collectors up to 12-inch and bigger, depending on what's running through, like Fifth Street, Second Street, Third Street, those are bigger lines as those run through. So engineers, cost estimate and construction was 5, the bid was 7.2. We're awarding this, and this was our one ARPA project that we were given when we applied for the 9. And so we think that there may be additional funding for this project, and they're talking about awarding that to the different agencies that are under contract. So we're going to get under contract. We don't want to use too much of the optional 1% money. If there's some value engineering, we need to go back through and reassess or just look back at this project, see if there's any savings talking to the contractor. We can do that. But I'm hoping that there's more funding and to take off some of that local burden so that we can use more of that optional 1% on the other 9 projects that we're trying to get done as well. Because if, our match is used here, it lowers how much we'll be able to get done in the future. So still just trying to figure out what we can and can't do, and trying to best bang for our buck, I guess. Yeah, I think we give the contractor free schedule because that was a rebid. So we added more time to get interest and to add flexibility, but certainly we'll voice our biggest concerns and say, hey, is there a way to tackle these shallower water lines first, these areas we've had issues, get them done right away so that we're not, dealing with people without water again this winter if it gets really cold. So we'll voice it, but really, they could say, sure, but if you want to pay us X amount of dollars more, we'd be happy to, so we'll talk to them and see how that goes. So the city master plan update, just put a little bit of information in this. So we got the 2024 master plan update and parks and rec plan. So, some of these dates have passed. We're at this point where AIRS was going to be here, but I put this in there last week to try to provide that information to Rotary. So hopefully people had their chance to go meet and talk. If not, I think there's going to be upcoming opportunities to still get involved. So upcoming projects, here's the 44 million and, what we're still looking at doing. So Buena Vista, Cascade and South 6, those sewer lagoon improvements, Fifth Street, Baldwin Creek, McFarland Drive, First Street from end to end, and then the Dillon Vista subdivision, the areas that didn't get renewed already, and then, fixing a lot of paving and infrastructure issues out there. So 44 million. I'm not sure this is going to get all that done, but we'll keep working on it. We'll go as far as we can. What we're talking about is, potentially taking these projects into a more appetizing contract for a larger contractor to come in and commit to lander on. So there's a CMAR process that's out there that want to make you guys aware of that we're exploring. And that's a construction manager at risk approach. And you end up working rather than 9 different engineers, 9 different contractors and trying to manage all of that. You work with one overall contractor who's going to manage and operate and then work on these projects over 5 years. We're hearing a lot from contractors that they're a little bit scared to build up a crew and to re-engage locally. And, if they were to get a project like this, it can bond for something like this, then maybe they'd be more interested in, diving into this and then gearing up for it and having the availability, planning and working with Public Works. This amount of project is going to be a nightmare for us locally, just not having the staffing, especially if we have, just me and, the assistant public works director trying to run to every meeting as we're going and then keep up with change orders and other processes. So we're trying to see if that process might be a better option for us and if that could be also a cost savings, because then you negotiate your price every year as well. You get the opportunity to understand, if asphalt increased and the contractor wants an increase to that, that's something that you talk about, like what happens each year, how much you're going to get done. I know I've talked to a few contractors. They seem interested in this. The state has a plan and a program for using their funds on it. Nobody's done it, but we're always like, well, we're landers, we'll try it. Maybe this would be good and could ultimately be something to get more done for less and save on that engineering side and construction side. John? We're gonna give it to the contractor and let them prioritize if we do a CMAR. And so that way they can, our hope is don't do intersecting streets, don't screw up the 4th of July. Be smart as far as what you're planning and your scheduling, but giving that sort of flexibility then to a contractor over 5 years to figure out, how aggressively do I want to do this? How can I manage and operate these jobs? If you do this, it's $8.5 million or whatever a year. That's manageable versus 44 in 1 or 2 years. Like that would just be a bomb went off if we tried to sink too much in at one time. And I'm not sure we have the local contracting just based on our bid and bid experience. We're begging to get bids at this point. We're calling, trying to recruit. And I'm like, I've never been here as an engineer where, you're calling up and like, how do we make these projects work for you? Versus, having people show up and say, hey, what do you got? How do we get your work? So it's different, but we're trying to navigate it. So that opens it up to questions. Or anything else you want me to talk about.
About that process. What project or contractor?
I think the staff, we have to talk about it a lot more and get Adam involved. That's a first for me. I'm not comfortable with it. I've done design bid, I've done other types of contracts. CMAR is something that really got popular through our, and that's through committing these funds and having somebody on board in a way to spend these funds in the future years, but really short up that equipment or commitment, excuse me. But it also made it so that your engineering didn't have to be perfect. You could have like 50%, 60%, and then the contractor was going to add value engineering and help finish designs in that process too. So I think it's something we're exploring. I would say we're going to go through, understand it fully before we recommend it, back to you guys and say conventional competitive bid or this process. We'll have to explain to you why we're recommending one versus the other. I just wanted you to know, we're looking at alternatives to try to be effective and efficient and be able to manage all the things that we've got going on. Yeah, construction manager at risk, I believe is what it is. CMAR.
Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
It's not exactly a CMAR process, but it's very similar to what you guys approved for the airport projects. Whiteout Aeronautics allows us to advertise a request for solicitation for proposals, I guess. We select an engineer for 5 years. And so they do all the engineering and then they do the construction management for us for whatever projects aeronautics approves. So it's very similar to that, where you have a 5-year contract and you're doing, in this case, it wouldn't have engineering attached to it, but you're doing all of the engineering or the construction and construction management through this process.
Well, this is the time to talk. I mean, it's the question slide, so go for it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I guess thanks, for letting us do all these. It's fun to see money going into the town, and I know that you guys all catch a lot of flack for, some of the ways and the planning that we've been doing, but hopefully that planning is, paying off into big construction projects and ways that we can afford to do more. I know that, we were sitting on the $5 million, of money for the optional 1%. And we're like, well, let's put something out for bid. And that wouldn't even have gotten all of Lincoln Street if we hadn't paired that with something. So I just, the cost of, the asphalt, the cost of the materials, I hope that levels out. But if not, we'll have to keep working on how do we do this, and what we can find for, I'm not not a person who loves going through the grant process, but finding out that, hey, when we're successful and we can bring this money back, it sure makes it go a lot further. So we'll keep doing our best, but hopefully you guys can explain this a little bit to the public as to the things that are going on, or, ask questions as far as the stuff that's coming up. I'm happy to sit down with people, but a lot of this was just trying to follow through with the plans we put in place years ago. And now hopefully this is coming to construction and starting to pay off. Those are the ones that I keep going, the ones that are local that I know that I think have the capacity to do this type of work. I'm like, man, well, I'd really like to see this money go right back into our local economy. So if you guys could get geared up again, some of them have downsized, some of them are working in projects in other areas. And it's like really great to get those ones. It's great to see High Country working here, but the Patrick Constructions, the Alexanders, the Arteries, any of them that are here, that's our dollar being recycled here if they'll do it. And then outside of that, yes, other Wyoming contractors. I mean, I think like Wilson Brothers out of the Cali, Deaver area, they worked for us in the past. And, it'd be great to come back to town, but they have to mow and, they have projects in there. They've got Cody, they've got Red Lodge, they're up in Montana. And there just aren't a lot of big bonded contractors still standing. Yeah, it does. And I mean, Oftedall has showed some interest. They bid the Lincoln Street job down at Casper, and then they showed up to the Wells pre-bid. So, maybe we're attracting some new people, but I don't think we're really setting any limitations as far as who could come in here as long as they could do the work. But it'd be great to get a local contractor.
I noticed the longer we wait to do these projects, the cost goes up. It just keeps climbing. But I said, it's just crazy. Like man says, I hope it helps off too. But I don't see that in the future right now. Yeah.
What's happening is outside contractors not coming into the state. Most of the contractors we're used to seeing, but they done COVID. I mean, by the end of COVID, they downsized the company. That's what's happening to a lot of people that we used to draw them down. They don't even mess with them. They taking the business on the pot situation and small,
I don't either. Yeah, I think we're just gonna have to keep moving forward in the markets if we want to do work and figuring it out. But exactly right.
Yeah,
All right, thanks.
good presentation. Thank you, Lance. Thank you. Okay. Let's go home. Okay, thank you, guys.
Bye, Josh.
Have a good night.